what's important to understand about like an alcohol addiction is what is alcohol? It's the fastest sugar on the planet.
Mm. Yeah, crosses the
Okay?
blood-brain barrier the quickest, doesn't it?
That's right. It's the fastest sugar on the planet. So then it says, so when someone has a craving for that sugar, you have to ask yourself, why do they have the craving?
Mm.
The reason why they have the craving is that they have a dopamine deficiency.
Mm.
Why do they have a dopamine deficiency? Because it takes tyrosine and dopamine beta monooxygenase, very important enzyme, which is copper dependent, by the way. And you take that amino acid plus that enzyme plus that mineral, and voila, you get dopamine.
Mm.
And when people are short on bioavailable copper, they're not going to make enough dopamine and they're going to start to crave sugar. And when they start to imbibe in alcohol, like my mom did for many years as an alcoholic,
Mm-hmm.
so I understand this. It's not just a research interest, it's a very real interest.
Mm.
Because I could never figure out why does my mom drink so much, but now I know. And when you start to drink alcohol, it burns out outrageous amounts of magnesium and zinc and B
Mm.
vitamins in the body.
Yeah.
And then when that becomes chronic, the liver no longer is able to make ceruloplasmin. Guess what happens? Copper goes rogue.
Mm.
Copper becomes unavailable to make the dopamine, which only reinforces the craving for more sugar.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the vicious circle that gets created. And it's like until you break that, it'll consume you, as you certainly understand.
Yeah. It's funny. I put a post. It's a very, this subject is it's very. You put it out there like Bill Wilson. How much Bill Wilson started looking into niacin just before he died, and it was a big thing. And but you speak about this stuff in the rooms and about neurotransmitters. People just, I can't. I couldn't even tell you. I wouldn't even say on air. The response to the post I got and the language that was on there, and I don't mind dropping a few f bombs here and there, Morley, and that. But God, the abuse I got just putting this post out there and people were saying, but it's just education, is it? That's all it is. It's education for people. That's
Well,
what it is.
the thing is, the state of helplessness and hopelessness causes the greatest amount of magnesium loss
Mm, mm,
because you feel trapped. And
mm,
when you feel trapped, there's this instinctual release of magnesium. So then that sets the stage for a lot of issues.
mm,
And when people find out that some who have suffered with addictions for much of their life, that in fact that this could have been corrected with my diet, with some supplements, they get rightfully angry
yeah.
for a couple reasons. One, why wasn't I told this? Why was I misled? I mean, it conjures up all sorts of emotion to realize that you've been a patsy for your whole life.
Yeah.
And then you multiply it times 7 billion people on the planet, and you're like, wow, it's amazing how out of touch with reality most people are about their symptoms. Which, see, the thing is, what the doctor loves to do, it's amazing what they do. But as soon as you walk into their office, they're putting an imaginary race car jumpsuit on your body,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're sticking labels all over that jumpsuit. Well, you're hypothyroid. Well, you're manic depressive. Well, you've got pyrrole disorder. Well, you're an alcoholic. And they use those labels to make you think that all these different diseases are coming from different planets and different solar systems. And,
It's
and
true.
you begin to believe it.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. I say it with like ADHD. It's just I just think that I'm not. That's just for a different subject, really. But the ADHD thing just kills me, And I say to
Yeah,
people, when they come up with a new drug, they've got to come up with a new name for something. And if I was, if all this stuff was about when I was younger, Morley, I'd be diagnosed ADHD, ABC, XQ. I would
yeah,
have had all
absolutely.
of it, and I would have been probably on everything. It's just. It does. I just say to people sometimes, "Where do you think this stuff comes from? What do you just think it's like meat, like an alien's just dropped on the planet and spread this? It's just crazy. It's crazy. It's
And the
crazy."
thing is that where all this insanity started was with our great grandparents. Started about 1900, and that's when they started changing farming practices in the Western world,
Mm,
which then changed the quality of food. Well, then they processed the food. Well, then they started changing the water treatment around the world. And then they started changing dramatically medications after the Second World War. And then they introduced things like GMO in the 90s and high fructose corn syrup in the 80s. And it's like, and I'm just ticking off a few things in a hurry, but the point is, we're talking about in 4 or 5 generations, they basically have diminished our mineral status to the point that our bodies don't work.
yeah,
And because we've never been trained or told that minerals matter, people believe all those labels that they're given.
yeah,
But when they find out, in fact, every the phrase that I use, I think you asked for what's my favorite quote. There is no such thing as a medical disease.
mm,
There's only metabolic dysfunction that's caused by mineral deficiencies.
mm,
And every label that people are walking around with that's tattooed to their forehead and their psyche is caused by an enzyme that's not working because of a missing mineral. And the tragedy, it's actually a double blind experiment because not only does the patient not know this, the doctor doesn't know it either.
mm, yeah,
And
yeah.
that's the outrageous part of this whole dynamic is there's ignorance on both sides of the stethoscope.
Yeah, I totally agree. Let's talk about it because I wanted to get onto nutrition, and as we come in to the end of it, let's talk a little bit about nutrition, Molly, because I was in a shop earlier and I just see the younger generation. I'm not old, and I do, I'm in 36, but I see the youngsters now and I just think to myself, in the mornings they're standing there with their monster drinks, their energy drinks, and their chocolate bars and their sweets and all that, and I just look at it and think the body's just not getting anything from that. No wonder we're creating. I think Paul Chek said it. We're just creating a world of sick people. A world of sick people.
That's right. The focus is on stimulation, not on rebuilding tissue.
So true. Very true.
And until you get to minerals, you can't rebuild tissue.
I don't think that you'll get too many minerals from these energy drinks that they're pumping out there to kids
No,
and chocolate bars. I don't think.
no, not at all. So I think in terms of I mean, just yesterday, someone put up on the mag group. They had a picture of some protein drink called Shakeology or something like that, and people got all a Twitter about it. And I said, wait a minute, guys, hold on. I said, there's a simple rule. Would your great grandmother recognize this as food?
Mm,
And if not, why are you eating it?
mm,
And then I said, then there's a second rule. Do the ingredients on this product read like a recipe, like you would find in any classic cookbook? Does it read like a recipe? And if it doesn't, go back to rule number one,
mm,
because your great grandmother wouldn't recognize it, so then you shouldn't be eating it. And what's really the ground rule is the food should be real.
yeah.
And I had this conversation with my oldest daughter, who didn't understand what real food was. And I finally realized what the disconnect was. I said, it means there's no label on the food.
Yeah.
She went, oh, okay, I get that. I understand that.
Mm,
She didn't, up until that point, she didn't know what real food was.
mm.
Because she thought if it came in a box, a can, a bag, or through her car window, then it must be real.
Car window. Yeah, very true. And I say that with when I say to people about eliminating soya and gluten, and they say to me it's so difficult. And it's in everything. It's not in everything. If you eat real food, it's not in. You don't pick up carrots that are gluten free or potatoes, or meat, beef that's gluten free and things like that. If you just eat real food, you haven't got to worry about that.
And the thing with gluten free is, again, let's go back in time, go back to your great grandparents. Their staple food was bread, butter,
Hmm.
cheese, milk, things like that. So bread was pretty darn important for them. And now it's become a toxin.
Mm.
Well, what did bread deliver? What does wheat? For 10,000 years, wheat was a primary source of B vitamins and minerals.
Mm.
What a surprise. So what have they done? They've turned it into a toxin.
Mm.
Well, how did they turn it into a toxin? Well, they changed its structure. It used to be 4 feet tall. Now it's 18 inches tall. But in doing that, they've also been monkeying around with fertilizers, but also the weed killers. And so now modern wheat is now sprayed with glyphosate.
Hmm.
It's known as Roundup.
Hmm.
And Stephanie Seneff at MIT, she's actually trained to be an electrical engineer, but she's really smart, very interested in nutrition. Well, she pulled back the curtain on glyphosate and figured out, oh, lo and behold, what is glyphosate? It's a mineral chelator. Thank you very much. And it's an antibiotic.
Mm. Interesting.
So it's sucking minerals out of the soil so they don't get into the plant.
Mm.
And as an antibiotic, it's making sure that there's copper dysregulation. Now, do you think that stops just at the soil and at the plant? Or do you think it could possibly continue as you eat that food when it goes inside your tummy? And in
Mm.
fact, what is celiac and all this psychodrama about gluten sensitivity?
Mm.
It's copper dysregulation.
Mm.
And in fact, gluten, the wheat today, one of the things they changed was they put 3 times more protein in it. The gluten is the protein.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's 3 times more gliadin, and the body is overwhelmed by the gliadin, and it causes an immunoglobulin reaction, and that's what's causing the sensitivity.
Yeah. Um, it's a lot of cross reactions, aren't there, with gluten and gliadin and other
Right.
grains and that as well. Once you're compromised and your gut's compromised and like you say your minerals are out of balance. I get a lot of clients that come to me that they could tolerate some foods, but as they've gone further on and further on, they can't tolerate. They're tolerating less and less foods. More bloating, more digestive problems.
And so what that means is that they are more and more mineral deficient.
Yeah.
And the crosshairs are magnesium deficiency and copper deficiency. It's what sets the stage for almost all chronic disease, especially becoming hypersensitive to one's environment,
Mm.
to the foods in one's environment, to the chemicals in one's environment, to the seasonal changes in one's environment. That when you are a magnesium and copper desert, you become hyper reactive to your environment.
Mm. Yeah.
And that's the part that people miss. And what they've been trained to do is to become gluten free, soy free, sugar free, dairy free, all these frees. And I'm like, what do you eat?